Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Gramm. Joining me today is Colin Camper. On today's show, we're going to talk to UFC fighter Joe Lauzon about his fight on the Ultimate Fighter 22 finale, and then we will pick the main card fights for that card, Ultimate Fighter 22 finale, headlined by Frankie Edgar against Chad Mendes. Once again, I am your host, Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. And joining me today, you saw him earlier in the week. This is our Facebook correspondent, Colin Camper. And Colin, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I enjoy it.
All right. Now we're going to talk to Joe Lauzon. Colin's going to queue up Joe here to talk to us. If you don't know Joe already, he's been in the UFC since 2006. You can follow him on Twitter at Joe Lauzon is his handle, and he will be taking on Evan Dunham here on the main card for the Ultimate Fighter 22 finale. So welcome to the show, Joe, and thanks again for coming on.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Joe, of course, we just had Thanksgiving a couple weeks ago, and I was wondering, how was your Thanksgiving, Joe?
My Thanksgiving was pretty good. You know, I eat like a fat kid all the time, so I ate everything. You know, I toned it back a little bit. I didn't eat myself into a food coma. You know, I stuck to one Thanksgiving dinner instead of two, which I normally do. But you know, it wasn't too bad. I don't have to diet super strict. I have a super fast metabolism, so it doesn't really affect me that much.
Of course, the card you're fighting on, the Ultimate Fighter 22 finale, it will be headlined by Chad Mendes and Frankie Edgar. Your thoughts on Edgar and Mendes?
You know, I think it's a really exciting fight. You know, I think Frankie's been so impressive. You know, somebody held the title for so long at 55. Coming down to 45. You know, I just think that Frankie's super impressive every single time out. Chad's very, very good, but I just feel like Frankie's going to be just a little bit too much, a little too smooth. Sport going to be a little bit too good. You know, but it's going to be a super exciting fight. Like, I can't wait to see, you know, what happens.
Of course, another big fight this weekend is the main event for UFC 194, of course, headlined by Conor McGregor against Jose Aldo. Your thoughts on that matchup for the undisputed featherweight title?
I'm interested to kind of see how it all plays out. I think that when you look at both guys, Aldo has got, you know, crazy hands, crazy exploding flying knees, good jiu-jitsu, good wrestling, all that kind of stuff. Especially, you can't forget the leg kicks. But then Conor is really, really big, really, really long. So I don't really know how it's going to play out. I kind of feel like Conor is going to win, which I think I'm in the minority. I think everyone else thinks that Aldo is going to win. But I think Conor is going to do well. I think he's going to do a really good job using his reach, because all the other guys that all those fought have all been much, much shorter guys. You know, but now you're fighting a guy that's really, really tall. I think Connor's going to give him some trouble with his length.
All right, Joe, I'm going to ask you a couple questions here about video games. Of course, if you just go to your Twitter page there, at Joe Lauzon, you're a self-proclaimed video game junkie. So I'll start off with this, and it plays off the Aldo and McGregor fight. Of course, their fight will also be to become the cover athlete along with Ronda Rousey for the next UFC game. So you think that's kind of cool that they get to kind of fight their way to be on the cover?
You know, I kind of feel like it's the curse. I think everyone that's been put on the cover has not done well immediately after. You know, they announced that Ronda was going to be on the cover and then she loses her fight. It's happened to a couple other people too. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I would want to be on the cover at that point. You know, so many bad things happen. It's interesting though. You know, it's like, okay, who wants to win this time and then be screwed later on? Like, I don't know. Interesting.
Now, one of the new trends here in video games is the games with figures, the new LEGO Dimensions games, Skylander, Disney Infinity. Have you tried any of those games with the figures there, Joe?
I picked up Fallout. You know, I freaking the game's a lot of fun. I've got like, I don't know, maybe like 40 hours into it. I play a lot of video games. I think it's awesome though. Like I'm just get obsessed with like building up my settlement, all that kind of stuff.
Now, have you tried any of the games with the figures though, Joe?
I haven't. My little cousin plays all the Lego Star Wars games and all that stuff, but I have not gotten into it yet.
All right, fair enough. Now, your last fight, you actually got to fight Takanori Gomi in Chicago, and I was wondering, did you expect to finish him so quickly like you did?
No, I mean, I think that we never go in expecting to do something. You know, the expectation is always going to be that it's going to take a much, much longer time. We're going to have to be, we got to plan for, kind of the longer kind of run, because you don't want to go out there and, be too aggressive too soon. You don't want to waste all your energy. So you got to go out there and be ready. I mean, because the other thing too is if you go out there and expect that you're going to win immediately and it doesn't go that way, it's kind of a shot to your confidence a little bit. So we didn't go out there and expect that, but we definitely knew that was a very, possible outcome. I think that we felt going into the fight that if once I took him down, he was in a lot of trouble. And, it took us, it didn't take us long to get him down to the ground, and then the fight was over shortly thereafter. So I think we did a really, really good job kind of scouting him out and game planning and camp with we just executed very, very, effectively.
Now, of course, you've been fighting for over 10 years now, so a lot of victories you've had in your career would be big, but would you consider this one of your biggest victories, Joe, beating Takanori Gomi?
It's a big win, but I think that, I like all my wins for different reasons. All my fights, even some of the fights I lost, it's either, I got better or, brought some kind of, lesson or, something good has come from every fight. So, Gomi was definitely a good one, though. I mean, he was one of my heroes. He's one of those guys I used to watch. I have highlight videos on, old computers, and I used to watch in college and high school. And, he's definitely, one of my heroes. But that night he was an opponent. I had to take care of him.
As I mentioned earlier, you've been in the UFC for a while now. You actually debuted in 2006. And looking at your opponent here on Friday, Evan Dunham, he actually debuted in the UFC in 2009. Is it crazy to think after all that time that both of you have been in the UFC that you have never fought each other before?
It is a little weird. It is a little weird. We both, it's been so long we haven't bumped into each other. But he's always been a guy that I've liked to watch. I think he has exciting fights. Definitely a guy that, we've had our eyes on for a long time. Because I'm always paying attention to everyone in the lightweight division. Trying to pick up, habits, tendencies, even like, once we have a specific fight announced and, we're game planning for someone, then we really, dig into their tape and all that kind of stuff. But even before that, I'm constantly watching them. I'm paying attention to like what's going on and what they like to do and all that kind of stuff. So, it is a little weird, and I've been around longer, but I kind of feel like he's like the older guy. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Now, in Dunham's last two fights, he has really used the grappling game to his advantage, taking 2 straight victories over Ross Pearson being among them, and also Rodrigo Dam being the other. Do you expect him to use a similar grappling heavy attack against you, Joe?
We're not really sure exactly how he's going to fight, because sometimes when you see him fight a striker, he's kind of he fights a certain way when he's fighting a striker. He fights a certain way when he's fighting a grappler, and I'm really not sure how he's going to fight me. I think that my strengths are definitely more to the grappling, but those are his strengths too. So I don't know if he's going to want to try to take the fight to the ground, or he's going to try and keep it up, or what he's going to try to do. Like we've game planned and we've gotten ready for both. But I'm not really sure how he's going to approach it, because he does have 2 very distinct different ways to fight.
Of course, your fight here in Vegas will be one of 3 that they will have, 3 fights in 3 days, as I said, in Las Vegas. So how cool is it to be a part of something like this with all the events and all the fighters going on there in the fight capital?
Yeah, it's really cool. Like you said, 3 fights, 3 days, 2 different hotels. I think it's something like 30 or 35 fights or something. It's pretty nuts. But I'm pumped to be a part of it. It's kind of cool. Like they're basically using MGM as kind of like the center for everything, the hub. Because I think the fight on Thursday and Saturday are both there, and then my fights on Friday is at the Cosmopolitan. But they still have everyone at MGM. That's where the UFC office is. That's where everything is. So it's kind of cool. Like MGM is like this big, huge like UFC center with just fans everywhere. Media workouts over there. Like it's pretty nuts. It's awesome to be involved in such like a big deal.
All right, Joe, I'll get you out of here with this. Of course, Christmas is coming up here for 2015. So what's on Joe Lauzon's Christmas list here?
A win over Evan Dunham is number one. After that, it's all about Christmas gifts for my little kid. That's it.
All right, he is Joe Lauzon. You can follow him on Twitter, just his name, @Joe Lauzon. And Joe, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it and look forward to your fight against Evan Dunham on Friday, December 11th.
Oh, thank you.
Once again, that was Joe Lauzon right here on Beyond the Cage. All right, we got to talk with Joe, so we'll get to his fight plus the other 4 fights here on the main card for the Ultimate Fighter 22 finale, Team Faber versus Team McGregor. And Colin, let's start first with that fight for the 6-figure UFC contract. Artem Lobov loses in the fight to get on the house. But in a new twist, as they seem every year now with the Ultimate Fighter, Dana White decided to bring back 2 losing fighters as determined by each team, 1 for each team. And they would have 9 preliminary fights. And then Dana would determine which winner out of the 9 in the first round he didn't like the most. It was the most boring, I guess you could say.
Right.
And that ended up being Chris Gersmacher. He got let go. So we got the 8, and then an injury to Martin Svensson allowed Gersmacher to get back in to the competition for the 8. And so that was kind of our final 8 there. Then Artem Lobov, a guy that he's a brawler. I mean, you look at his record, he's 11-10 in his career, 1 draw, has a no contest. He has 4 knockouts of those 11 victory, but 7 decision losses. So it proves the guy that he can dish out a punch, but also take it, throwing from the hip. And he was just really just going out there and banging, to take from another Ultimate Fighter guy a couple years, just let me bang, bro. And that's pretty much what Artem Lobov did into the finals with probably his most impressive knockout there in the finals, semifinal round, knocking out Juicy J, Julian Erosa there in was it 25 seconds, I think?
Roughly about 25, yeah.
He may not be the most technically sound, but he comes to fight.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, I can see why Dana brought him back. Obviously, he really wanted him. I mean, he's a brawler. That's the kind of thing, these kind of guys, they're I don't want to say they're few and far between, but I mean, if you look at his record, I mean, there's not much in between his win and loss ratio, but this dude comes out just swinging, and it's got like that plodding forward kind of thing, and some fighters, they just end up getting caught. I mean, we saw that with Juicy J earlier. I mean, everything. He was willing to stand up there and everything, which, I mean, we spoke during the fight. We thought Juicy J had a better technical striking. But Artem, man, it takes 1 punch. And
yeah, he's looked really good so far. So he makes it to the finals. Now, he was supposed to take on Sal Rogers, who had a very nice semifinal win, ended up submitting his fellow European teammate there, the Polish Zombie.
Right, yeah.
Much to my chagrin, defeating the guy from Poland there. But due to a issue with his visa, I guess he didn't. He wrote something wrong, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Sometimes those forms can be confusing. Now they said he lied on it. Now again, whether that's intentional or not is prohibited from coming back into the United States for this fight. So he is out, and the guy he beat to get into the semifinal round, Ryan Hall, he is back in. And before the show, we were talking about, did they make the right decision? Should they have chosen someone else from Team Europe to still have the European replacement? And I can get that. I think that's a logical thing to bring someone from Europe since they earned that spot. But I do get the Ryan Hall thing. I mean, he had 2 he got into that quarterfinal round. His other 2 fights, very quick and really amazing submissions there with the heel hook. He fought Sal very close. In fact, I thought that fight should have had a 3rd round, ended up going down as a majority decision win for Sal. That means 1 judge did score it a draw. So it was a very close fight. It wasn't like a completely one-sided fight. And obviously, they say styles make fights. Ryan Hall is the complete opposite of Artem Lobov. I mean, this is a guy looking at his career here. You don't want to talk about a complete opposite. Younger in his career in terms of MMA, but very experienced in the jiu-jitsu circuit as he's now 30 years old, but 4-1, 2 submission victories to his credit. And he's most known for his heel hook there, as he showed it twice there in the show, and also his most recent victory in the UCL promotion back in May of last year what a surprise. He won by submission heel
Right,
hook
yeah, who would've
in the
thought?
first round. So this is what that guy excels at. He talked about it there, I think, in his first fight once he made the cast. He specializes in that 50-50 position because he says, like it is, it's 50-50. It can go either way. Most people don't practice that position. He goes either when they're in total dominance or when they're getting totally dominated. You don't practice as much in a position that can go either way.
Right.
And he's worked extensively at this position. And there are probably very few people in not even MMA, but also just jiu-jitsu that probably have really worked this position, have kind of worked out a strategy like this. And because of that, he is a threat to anybody he faces because he brings a different level of strategy. I'm not sure if I've ever seen anyone really work it out like that before.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a lot different. And a lot of people were expecting it going to this season, especially to have another fighter with the name Hall really pull off something bizarre. It's definitely novelty is the term I would use. I mean, we saw what happened last time a guy came in with something novelty and started choking dudes and putting them to sleep in Cody McKenzie. And people were like, oh man, dude, people are just going to get caught no matter what. And then we saw how long he lasted. That's not dissing on the Ryan Hall because he's truly talented. But it's the same sense where we're saying, they're the complete opposite of each other, Autumn and Ryan. But at their moment in their careers, it almost feels one-dimensional.
Yeah, they're definitely one-dimensional guys, but it should make for an interesting fight. I don't see it going the 15 minutes, and it's either Artem gets the knockout or Hall gets the submission. I would find it hard to believe it goes to 15.
I don't think it's going to go to 15, especially these Ultimate Fighter guys. They really put it all out on the table and that kind of thing. They don't ever really want to go to the decision. I mean, guys like Forrest Griffin, Stephen Bonner, fights like that. But lately with Ultimate Fighter, there's so much of it. You really want to get your name known, so you don't want to just grind off a decision 30-27.
Now, real quickly for Saul, of course, they have that London card coming up, and I wonder if
that's a good
this
point.
thing has completely soured the UFC on him, or if they're going to go, well, you got to fix trying to get back in here because this is where most of the fights are going to get taken place, but we'll have you fight in your home country. Yeah,
right.
I have a very good feeling that, like I said, if it was something unintentional, he just marked off the wrong versus Australia, and that kid said the racist comments like years ago on Instagram.
Tyler Manuel.
So they said he's off from the UFC. He still will fight in the UFC.
I feel like it's probably just something that he probably just slipped up on, like you said. I mean, it's next. I mean, he's gotten into the country before to film The Ultimate Fighter, so he's had to fill out the form. So it could have been something. It could have even just been forgetting to renew something and just thought he did and checked it off
or
as
pay something.
Exactly, and he could have wrongly assumed that it was already handled. And Dana's saying it was a lie. I mean, who knows what Dana even heard? We'll find out in the later days. But I would like to see him on the London card. That card's becoming really stacked, and I liked Saul Rogers. He's really well-rounded. He's grindy, but he goes for the finish, which is nice. He tends to be really active on the ground. In later rounds. In this semifinal tonight, we saw first round was kind of slow, but come that second round, he really just kept going for it. I mean, with a good record, honestly, with good training, that guy can go somewhere.
All right, let's get to the next fight of the evening, which should be in the welterweight division. The long-awaited return of Mike Pierce. He has not fought in the UFC since October 2013, nearly 2 years ago. He returns in action, and now one of the younger and up-and-coming guys here in the UFC's welterweight division, that being Ryan LaFleur. Very interesting matchup. Both guys are very wrestling-minded individuals. Both are grinders. Both like to be on top and land damage. And the difference to me in this fight will, one, be the octagon rest. Mike Pierce, again, hasn't been around for 2 years, not to mention that serious injury he took at the hands of Husmar Polaris, holding on too long of that heel hook. Is that leg fully healed? Will it be good to go? Add in the fact he's now 35 years old. He's 2 years away from the sport. Is this going to be the same guy, that was competing with the likes of, Josh Koscheck and Johnny Hendricks, taking John Fitch, taking these guys to like standstills, to close fights? I mean, he had split decision losses to both Koscheck and Hendricks, and I believe John Fitch. I mean, those were all very close fights. This guy was so close to breaking into the top 10 a few years ago. I don't think he'll probably return to that.
Probably not.
But it'll just be interesting to see just if he can return to being competitive. And this is a perfect guy in Ryan LaFleur because it's a similar skill set to him, and it's a guy coming off a loss, a guy who's looking to kind of reestablish himself in the division as well. So I think it's a good fight for Mike Pierce to come back on.
Yeah, I think a lot of people missed Mike Pierce. I mean, some of the older fans definitely we remember who Mike Pierce is. There's been a lot of new fans coming in these past few years who might not even know who he is. Being said, I think the ring rust and his age is really going to play a factor in this fight. I think it's going to be frustrating for him to deal with Ryan LaFleur's size and the fact that there's not going to be an advantage either way for Pierce or LaFleur when it comes to wrestling or anything. It's going to be, almost, I don't want to say even, but I think it comes down to just the younger athletes that we have coming into the UFC these days. I mean, now that being said, Mike Pierce, he's a tough dude, and he's an excellent fighter. But LaFleur has been talked about for a minute now. I mean, and now LaFleur's not the youngest guy, but he is a lot fresher and more up to date.
And he's not
Pierce.
coming off a 2-year layoff.
Exactly. So,
and also in the fact that you talked about size, Pierce listed at 5'8", LaFleur at 6'1".
Did some people that's like, oh man, it's only like a handful of inches. Like that's almost half a foot. That's
huge because
difference.
You factor in that's going to be a bigger reach. You have more leverage to stop takedowns, which is Mike Pierce is very good at. So it should be an interesting fight, and I'm glad. Like I said, even if Mike Pierce doesn't make a run or come close to the top 10 like he did before, it's just nice to see him come back because it was just so unfortunate the way he had to go out with Polaris holding on to that heel hook. And, that really, we talk about momentum. That stopped momentum from him because if he would have that would have just been a regular loss, no big deal. But, he was on a 4-fight winning streak heading into that fight, beating some very solid guys like Aaron Simpson and David Mitchell. So...
And he was fighting often. That's the thing. He was fighting 4 or 5 times a year.
Yeah, just that, he had fought 3 times there in 2012 and was on his second fight there in 2013. So, I'm just glad to see him come back, and, he'll probably have a few fights and then retire. But again, it's just glad to see him back because that was kind of a shame.
Yeah.
Let's get to the next fight of the evening in the lightweight division. Of course, we just talked to him, that being Joe Lauzon at 155. And like we asked Joe, it's crazy to think that Joe Lauzon's been in the UFC since 2006, Evan Dunham 2009, and somehow these two, with all the fights they've had in the UFC, both Joe Lauzon's at like over 20 fights, Evan Dunham I think has had over 15, that somehow these two have never fought each other before. It's so weird. And he commented, he goes, it's pretty crazy to think we never have thought before.
It's so bizarre because they're really similar dudes in the way they're back and forth with their wins and losses, but they're solid fighters. And it's so bizarre that when one dude was up, one dude was down and flipped back and forth. And it's just, you've never seen them bump together. And for some reason, I always feel like I could recall the fight happening, even though it never has.
Right. And so both of them are obviously coming off a win. As we mentioned, Joe Lauzon, one of the biggest wins of his career, knocking out Takanori Gomi in the first round there at UFC on Fox in Chicago early this year. And Evan Dunham riding a 2-fight winning streak, just really out-grappling Pearson and Dam in those 2 fights. And as I asked Joe, does he expect more of a grappling attack like Dunham did in those 2 fights? And he was uneasy about it. He was a little unsure. He was like, well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I think in the grappling department, Dunham will have the better wrestling, but Lauzon will definitely have the better submissions and will not be afraid of being on his back, even with a guy like Evan Dunham. And staying standing, Joe Lauzon's a little more reckless. He's willing to take more risk, and that that unpredictability makes him a little hard to prepare for. But I would say Dunham's the more technically sound in the stand-up department. And if it stays exclusively standing, I don't think Joe has as good of a chance to win. But if he can get this more grappling into the mix, even if it's initiated by Dunham, that's more into Lauzon's wheelhouse.
Definitely. He's one of those fighters where it's like not a lot of people even really know the name. I mean, unless you've been watching for a minute now, Evan Dunham. But he's been around for a hot while, and he pops up on some decent fights, and he's definitely been on some of the ends of my favorite ones. But he's going to put some good questions up on the Joe Lauzon's game now, because Joe Lauzon's, obviously been fighting for a minute, and he has a ton of fights under his record. And Evan Dunham's so good everywhere, and it's going to be something for Lauzon to work with. Being said, Lauzon's got this weird thing where he has this power in his hands that he's not like knocking dudes out cold, but he's able to rock someone, and then he capitalizes so quick on whether he's going to follow up and try for a TKO or if he's going to try and take you back.
Absolutely. One of the best finishers we've ever seen. I mean, he has 25 pro wins out of 35 fights, 24 finishes. One decision victory out of all the guys he's fought is pretty incredible when you think about it.
It's like him and Cerrone are like up there with like fight of the night bonuses and submission bonuses.
And Carlos Condit's another guy with a high, overall high finishing rate. It's a very short list of guys with that many percentage. So regardless, he's going to bring the fight. I don't think there's ever been a boring Joe Lauzon fight.
Definitely not.
That doesn't happen. So looking at the co-main event of the evening, we'll stick with the lightweights as Edson Barboza takes on Tony Ferguson. Originally, Ferguson was supposed to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov, Nurmagomedov, as I say it correctly. I got me tongue-tied. It's a confusing name, but still a big-time fight as Barboza was able to fill in, and Ferguson has just been on a roll since losing to Michael Johnson back in May of 2012. He has won 6 fights in a row, beating some very tough guys like Danny Castillo, Abel Trujillo, Gleason Tebow, and most recently demolishing Josh Thompson back in July in San Diego. And he's taking on Edson Barboza, who had a little bit of a hiccup there. Same guy, Michael Johnson, in February of this year, but came back with a very nice win over Paul Felder in July on that UFC Chicago card, and it still makes it a big fight. If Barboza wins, it probably doesn't give him a shot at the title, but it puts him probably one step closer. For Ferguson, a 7th win in a row in a division like this, I think puts him on a very, very short list of taking on the winner of Rafael Dos Anjos and Donald Cerrone. You also added his excitement factor. And with these two guys' striking ability, I think there's no reason this fight can't be fight of the night, maybe even fight of the year. Both these guys are extremely talented strikers. I would say Barboza's probably a little more powerful, maybe a little faster, but El Kukui, just that height and wingspan he brings to the table. I mean, he's only 6 foot tall, but his wingspan is like 6'5" or something like that. He has a crazy, ridiculous reach, and that's going to be something that poses a problem to a lot of guys in this division. And Barboza, as we've seen, has had trouble with guys really moving forward and cutting off his moments, not allowing him to breathe, not allowing him to get space to uncork the powerful kicks and punches that he's capable of. And I felt he did a little better with that in the Paul Felder fight, but that is something that I think Tony Ferguson has to do. He has to keep the pressure up. He has to stalk Barboza, because if he sits back and plays at range, I don't care how big his reach is or how good his striking is, Barboza has proven that he can take you out with one strike. And you just can't give him space. If he gives him space, Barboza can have chance to wind up and do something nasty. But if he keeps the pressure up, you really limit Edson Barboza. And again, so far, he hasn't proved that he can overcome that style yet. So to me, if Tony Ferguson implies something different, he's really rolling the dice there, I think.
Definitely. Barboza's, he's coming up, and he's got this definite power. It's the way he moves his hips with his kicks and his punches. If he hits you in the body, in the back of the head, not the back of the head, the temple, I mean, it's a rough night in Vegas for you. But Tony Ferguson, he definitely has to come forward and definitely close that gap. And I don't think you have a hard time with it, with that reach advantage. He needs to get up in Barboza's face and just start pushing on him, push him to the fence. Don't let him cut. Just get on him. We saw Barboza have frustration with that with Michael Johnson.
And the Bobby Green fight as
well. And the Bobby Green fight. He definitely had some frustration where people were not just playing his game. They didn't want it. They weren't sitting back. They weren't afraid of it. They knew if they got in, they could just pressure this guy. Because we saw Barboza, he had a field day with Felder because Felder wanted to sit back and throw spin and stuff and everything. And which, don't get me wrong, I like Paul Felder, but you're playing a dangerous game with Edson Barboza when you want to sit there and throw like that. So, I mean, even in the Cerrone fight, even though Barboza lost, it was a close fight up until that loss.
He rocked him, and then
rocked
got
him
caught
good.
by a
And
submission.
Cerrone's a distance fighter. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like Barboza matches up with guys who don't want to come in, you know. So Ferguson, he's got to get up in the face. I mean, and he showed that he can because he comes from the same season as Johnson. You know, those guys, they're brawlers. They're up in the grill. But that's the method to victory. And it's really just going to be who has better octagon control and presence.
Let's get to that main event of the evening. 5 rounds in the featherweight division as the former lightweight champion Frankie Edgar takes on Chad Mendes. I'm pretty sure, much like the last one, title implications are on the line, as the winner most likely fights for the featherweight title, being their next fight. Man, this one is so close. It's a really close matchup. Both are great wrestlers. Both have Mendes a little more power. Both are good strikers. Mendes has obviously evolved into a better striker now. I know he's not there anymore, but Dwayne Bang, I think, helped, and he's continued still being a strong striker. And Frankie Edgar, obviously, just hard work, footwork, movement, always doing something. There's never a wasted moment or second with Frankie Edgar. And if it goes 5 rounds, I favor the former champion. I think he will have the better conditioning in this fight. The better finishing ability definitely belongs with Chad Mendes. He can end this thing with one punch, and that's a very big X factor in this fight, because Frankie's now, you know, he's a little older, you know, maybe a tad slower than he was during his championship run. This will now be his 26th professional fight. That's to me a real factor. And even though he's had great heart, he's gotten hit before. It's not like Frankie's never been tagged, you know.
He always gets his nose broken.
So he's gotten tagged before, but Mendes is a guy that can put him away. And the X factor will be, to me, is can Chad keep up with Frankie? Because if he can't keep up with Frankie, it don't matter how powerful he can hit or, you know, how sweet his double leg is. If he can't catch Frankie, that's going to be irrelevant. You know, he'll be wore out by the 3rd or 4th round. We may see Frankie sneak into submission or something and submit him. But if Mendes is able to keep up the pace, match the footwork, figure out his head movement, and able to land one of those big right hands that he's capable of, it could end up being a very big night for Chad Mendes.
Oh, definitely. Frankie Edgar has survivability. He's this weird dude where he eats some of the nastiest punches where you think, oh, dude, Frankie Edgar, there's so many fights he could have lost in like the 1st round. So, like a good handful where he had like a face busted up, a couple broken noses. And I feel like when that happens, though, he like blacks out almost or something, because then suddenly Frankie is just, you come in to capitalize and he hits that double leg on you, and then he's able to survive that round and score on you. So you could bust him in the face, break his nose, and somehow he's going to come out with a 10-9 round. It's weird. It doesn't always happen, but he has some type of weird like on switch that'll happen. And I think that's going to prove an issue for Mendes because we've seen with Frankie, it's hard to put that dude away. And this is a guy where it's not like, oh, he eats a punch on the chin and he keeps coming forward. We've seen him get like dropped and eat some of the nastiest hits and up kicks, and he just somehow manages to just survive it. And for Mendes, the issue is going to be is that Frankie has heart and conditioning like no one's business, and his footwork is just going to make it really difficult for Mendes to get in there. Edgar's no slouch on the ground. He's a great wrestler. I'm not saying he's better than Mendes, but he knows what Mendes is coming out with.
I would say Mendes is probably the better wrestler.
Oh, definitely.
But Edgar has the way better jiu-jitsu. He's been training for years with Renzo Gracie and Ricardo Almeida out there in New York, New Jersey. So to me, he's probably the better overall grappler because of that. But Mendes, I mean, this is a guy who had one loss his senior year of college wrestling.
That's
true.
I mean? Yeah, that's true.
This dude was a legit amateur wrestler.
I'm not knocking
as far
his wrestling.
as amateur wrestling credentials go, Mendes definitely. But yeah, like you said, and I said it earlier too, the pace is going to be something to look out for. And to me, that's the key of this fight. Can Mendes keep up with Frankie Edgar? If he can't, then I don't see a way he can win, short of a miracle.
Right. It'll be tough. He'll have to do it like real early, and I'll be surprised if it happens.
With that said, let's get to some picks here for the main card of the Ultimate Fighter 22 finale Friday night in Las Vegas, Fox Sports 1. First fight of the night for the contract, Artem Lobov against Ryan Hall. He's knocked people out, but I don't like the fact he kind of throws from his hips with that restless abandon. There's not a lot of technique behind it. It is exciting, Colin, but I got to go with the jiu-jitsu guy here in Ryan Hall. I think he'll be able to tuck under one of those big, bombs from the hip and slip in and get a heel hook or a choke or something. I just feel, of course he could certainly get knocked out, but I just feel Hall, the strategist that he is, I feel he'll be able to concoct something to counteract the Russian hammer.
Yeah, it's a classic UFC 1 matchup. You have, an American versus a foreigner. You have a guy who specializes in the ground, a guy who specializes in the stand-up. And for that one, though, I'm taking Artem because I feel that all he has to do is uncork and hit you. And watching just Hall kind of have to struggle with Rogers and getting him down even. I mean, Artem's been around so long, he has enough to probably be able to stuff any advantage. And I think it's just a first-round KO for Artem.
Mike Pierce against Ryan LaFleur in the welterweight division. Glad Mike Pierce is back, but I think Ryan LaFleur, a little younger, a little bigger, a little quicker, and obviously the layoff, doesn't really help Pierce's cause. So I'll take the guy from Long Island there, and Ryan LaFleur.
I'm gonna have to go with Ryan LaFleur, especially Long Island's been putting out some great fighters, and I feel like he's gonna be really ready for this fight.
155, Joe Lauzon against Evan Dunham. I'm not saying this just because we had on the show, but I'm going Joe Lauzon. I like the submission ability. I like the unpredictability that he brings to the table, and he's a gamer. He finishes guys. He's always in a fight, and his last couple fights have been hit or miss. But you could make the case about Evan Dunham's. I mean, they weren't the greatest guys that he fought there in the last two fights. So while Dunham has a chance, I'm going to go with Lauzon.
I'm going to go with Lauzon because I fear him. But realistically, both these guys bloody easy, and I think Lauzon's just got enough of that quote-unquote dad strength where it's just he doesn't seem muscular powerful, but he's got power for some reason. I think he's actually going to cut Evan up and probably bloody him pretty hard.
Co-main event of the evening, also in the lightweight division, Edson Barboza against Tony Ferguson. I think this is a great fight. Two of the younger guys in the division. God, pick. You know me. I usually pick the guy on the roll. Picking the guy on the roll here. I'm going with Tony Ferg to win this one, and I'm thinking he gets a title shot too in the process.
I think he gets a title shot for sure. I definitely picking him. That momentum's going to allow him to he's going to ride that in really hard and just get in Barboza's face. He's a smart fighter. And I think a title shot with him against Cerrone or Dos Anjos is going to be fantastic.
Main event of the evening, Frankie Edgar against Chad Mendes. Winner, again, they probably get a title shot as well. Going with Frankie Edgar, I think that his pace, his style, his movement, I think will be a little too much for Mendes. But again, as I said, Mendes could land one of those shots that makes that irrelevant, but I think Frankie will be able to avoid that and probably ride out a decision or a late submission.
Yeah, Frankie Edgar's been looking nothing but better since he fought Aldo, in my opinion, especially how he fought Swanson. I'm going to take Edgar, definitely. I think he just will outpace Mendes. Being said, if Mendes wins, I think he's going to get Tate, and I think he's going to get snubbed that title shot if Aldo wins. Or even if McGregor wins, I feel like they might snub him. I don't know why. I have this weird feeling that Dana just might either protect McGregor for 1 second and give McGregor a more favorable matchup in Max Holloway, which is a rematch that could happen, or I'm going to say it. I would love to see Chad Mendes, Aldo 3, but I don't know where that's going to go from there because either of those two dudes can move up a weight class after this weekend.
Yeah, we'll get to speculation for just a minute before we end the show here. Yeah, if Mendes wins and Aldo wins, then it creates an interesting situation. And then here's even more interesting. It would make it all easy. Well, then if Max Holloway wins, you just give Max Holloway. But what if Holloway loses to Jeremy Stevens? Are you then giving Jeremy Stevens the title shot over Chad Mendes? And then you're in a very interesting situation. So a lot of things could actually be screwed up this weekend.
Yeah.
The easiest is if Frankie Edgar wins, Frankie Edgar probably gets the shot, regardless whether it's Aldo or McGregor. But if anyone other than Edgar wins, it really changes things up because if Mendes wins and then Holloway wins, like I said, easy. But anything else, it really gets convoluted there. And who knows, they could even do the crazy thing of just making an immediate rematch. Let's do it again, Aldo and McGregor. Who knows?
Probably, who knows? Honestly, I mean, I could see that happening, an immediate rematch. I mean, we've seen the blueprints for it with every champ who's lost. I mean, even Kane and Verdum, which I honestly feel like is unjustified, because I feel like Verdum beat the brakes off Kane. Yeah, Kane had some rust, and you can argue the elevation, but he still beat him around pretty hard. And so in a division where it's stalled out that hard at heavyweight, and he still gets the rematch, I could definitely see one with Aldo McGregor because of money.
Right. And again, that was just announced for UFC 196. So we'll be earlier than the March date that Verdum was talking about. Thank God. Because that was going to really hold back the division if they were not going to fight until March. Now it's February. It's not as big a deal. So the UFC will have the luxury of being able to pick the winner of Stipe and Arlovski or JDS Overeem to face the winner of that. They'll be able to sit back, and probably the title loser will face the winner of those two matchups that didn't get the title shot. That's kind of my thinking there.
I can see that way. I mean, realistically, if I was a betting man, I'd say be prepared for JDS Verdum too. That I feel like that's probably going to happen eventually.
If everything works out, yeah, that probably would be the most likely.
Yeah, but who knows? Overeem could come out here and just surprise us all, take out JDS, and then Kane somehow beats Verdum, and then once again we're at a weird limbo, and we don't know what's going on with the division. So,
well, that does it for the show this week. Again, if you missed our earlier episode of the week where we picked the fights for the card tonight, UFC Fight Night 80, and we also interviewed Rose Namajunas for the card. And we also picked UFC 194. So you'll see that as one of the other most recently uploaded videos, and it's also the trailer, the official trailer for the channel right now. So just in case you missed that, I'll also put a link down below in the description as well, just in case you miss it. So again, thank our partners, MMA Signatures USA.com, MMAfreak.com, MMAinsider.net, MMAforlife.ca, and our friends at Top Rated MMA as well. So for Colin Camper sitting next to me, I'm your host, Jim Graham. And once again, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.